Hello friends, welcome back to the Accent Designer. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you some examples of how to better use components and variants in Figma in a much more efficient way. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So first of all, components, for those who don't know, it's pretty much a tool created in Figma to help facilitate the design process and make it less time consuming. So if you're working on large design files or multiple design tasks and have a large library of reusable elements, imagine having to create every single element from scratch or copy and paste the same thing over and over every time you open a new file in Figma. It takes a lot of time and such a time-consuming process, and honestly it doesn't look that professional or even intelligent when you share it with other people. So that's number one value of using and getting fluent at utilizing both components and variants. The second thing, it facilitates the process a lot with the developers when they build the pattern library. So once you start tokenizing all the elements, create consistent naming conventions for these components and variants. Even it doesn't have to be super sophisticated naming conventions, or you can even agree on what kind of conventions you want to name the components with the developers. The point here is the tool is there and it just bridges the gap a lot between the development team and the design team. All right, so as we can see here, here's just some components that I created beforehand prior to starting the video. And this one is Typography Scale. The good thing about components and variants that you can use it in a wide array of elements, not specifically limited for interactive components or buttons or shapes. You can pretty much use it for anything, even colors. So I'm going to show these examples here quickly. Let's say that you're working on a typographic scale in a pattern library and you're trying to create multiple instances or multiple variants of this font. You want to have variant number one as a header, variant number two, subheader, body text, etc., etc. So instead of creating each one individually, there is a much better way to utilize components, take advantage of variants, and make your typographic scale organized. So I'm going to create the first variation here. Let's just call it header, right? And now, because I want to transform this into the parent components or the original components in which all the variants will be embedded. So now I have this font. I'm just gonna create components and call this one just like a default state or something, right? And now what we're trying to do here is to create multiple variants and assign different properties for each variant to represent the which typographic scale we want to use. So variant number one, as you guys can see, I went to this property panel array and pressed on the plus sign to create a new variant, and I'm just call this one sub header. And here I'm just double clicking this one and we'll change the properties. Let's say I want my subheaders to be 18 pixels, and probably I want to make them semi-bold, not bold, right? And I'm gonna go back to my parent component here and create a third variant. And this one, I'm going to, let's say, make it like 16 pixel to represent the body text or something. So I need to highlight the main default frame around these components, go to variants and add new variants. And this one, I'm gonna just making sure I'm double clicking this, change the size to 16 pixels and make it regular. And here I have my body text. So this one would be, just to be clearer, and this one will be body text, right? So now I have three variants of this major or this parent component. So let's just call this type component. Right, let's go to create a new page. And let's just call this design sandbox. And make sure you highlight this first one over here, or any one of them really, it doesn't really matter. Go back here and paste it. Right, so now you have this main component that we assign as header or h1. So let's say that you're trying to change it to the body text, or you want to change it to the subheader. All you need to do, instead of going back and forth to copy and paste these new values, just go to this drop down menu over here and switch it to whatever variant you want. So this is the body text, this is the subheader. So it's such a great way to utilize components and combine all your typographic scale into just one frame or one component. I wish I can show you guys an additional feature here. Like once you create your components, one of the things you can do is, if we go back here and switch, so I have this component highlighted. Let's say that I want to publish that as a pattern, or like an accessible pattern that everyone else on the team can copy and paste. So you need to go to assets here and click this book icon. It says team library, and click publish. Unfortunately, I'm on a free membership for this video, so I can't really use my work Figma. So what would happen here is it's just going to ask me to upgrade my membership or move to a team. I can't do that right now. But if you're on a team, basically what you can do, you can press this publish button, and that will make whatever component you created accessible by every other team member from every other Figma file within the same project. So what would happen next is, if we just go back to the page where we created this, copied the components, and let's say that we just typed anything randomly, right? And we want to copy the properties we assigned for these components on the new text we just wrote down. And instead of having to copy and paste, what would you find is, if you go to text here and press these dots, you will find, instead of this empty state, you will find all the components and variants you assigned as styles in the pattern library. So you can just click it, and that will pretty much transform this new random text into one of the variants or one of the components that you created before, which is really, really helpful and easier for everyone to use. All right, the second example that I want to show you guys here is how to create interactive buttons or elements that stretches and snaps accordingly without having to adjust the properties. So the first thing, I'm just gonna create this frame or rectangle over here. I'm gonna make it a little bit rounded corners, make the, just look more vibrant, and change the color maybe to white just for the sake of this video. Right, then I'm gonna add a text label. Let's call it click here or something. Right, so now what I'm gonna do is make sure I'm highlighting everything here and create an auto layout. And the value of creating auto layout, so once you resize, or you can assign certain properties that will apply on every new instance that comes out of this component. First of all, make sure under resizing properties here that you assign these two properties hug contents, right? And once you do so, go and right click on your frame and create components. Now we made this a new component, right? So let's say that we're trying to create a new tab that pretty much has the same style but will contain different text label like this. So I'm gonna create an instance, this new instance over here, and I want to change the text label inside to continue later. See, the text label inside is lengthier than click here, and that's the reason why, because we transformed this component to auto layout and assigned the hug content properties. That's the reason why you can see the container stretches accordingly and snaps or maintain the same padding that we had here in the first one, even though the text label is completely different. So now let's see what would happen had we not changed the properties to hug content or auto layout prior to creating the components. So I'm gonna create this, pretty much the same component. Right. So we haven't converted this element to auto layout prior to creating the component. So let's see how would that work, or how's it gonna look like in comparison to the one we had up there. So let's create a new instance, and let's change the text to continue later. As you can see, like the box or the container doesn't really snap or stretch accordingly and maintain the same padding. And that's the power or the value of using auto layouts with specifically buttons and tabs prior to converting these elements to components. All right, now moving to example number 3, the one which is pretty much the most complicated one, or the one that requires more work than the others. And what I'm going to do here is create a drop-down menu. So the first thing I did here was just create this rectangle, and I had this like text label inside, an arrow. That's pretty simple. You can do that just following the same steps we had in the button. And then I highlighted everything and chose frame selection, and that's why I have a frame here, right? Now the following step would be create 2 states. The first one is the closed or the default state, as you guys can see here, the collapsed menu, and the second state will be the open or expanded menu. So now I'm just gonna create a component out of it. So I'm gonna create a new instance. So I'm just gonna call this one open state. I need to add a rectangle, a rectangle basically just to contain the countries or the selections. So I'm gonna create this rectangle over here, right? And because this is a component, so there's just a little bit of limitation, so you have to go back to your layers and make sure you're dragging this inside the variant. All right, so now I have my components and variants ready. So I have the original component, which is the collapsed state. Then I have the pretty much the second variant or the expanded state, and I added some countries, some lines. Now we finished creating the component. So even if you go highlight the original component, you can pretty much access all the variants that you created to this component following the same steps we had before in this drop-down menu associated with the component, right? All right, so now let's see how we can benefit from that. So I created these 2 artboards and placed one component on each artboard. Let's see how it's gonna animate. So let's first of all switch to prototype. So once you go and switch to prototype, you will have this node. You can drag it and place it on the second artboard because that's pretty much the destination you want this prototype to go to. And make sure to adjust the properties here. So you want these 2 elements to animate on tap once you tap it. And you want to make sure that your animation property is set to smart animate, not anything else. And keep in mind that prototyping in Figma, prototyping capabilities in Figma is just a little bit limited. And even though they have this smart animate feature, it's very convenient for like certain projects, but you can't really go above and beyond with it. So I'm gonna set it to smart animate and just like leave everything here as is and see how it's gonna react. Then go back here and pretty much do the same thing. Drag this node because I want it to react when I tap it or click it. I want it to take me back to the original artboard. And pretty much everything. You don't need to adjust anything here because it's copying the same properties you assigned in the first artboard. And as you guys can see here, it animates in a pretty convenient way because that's how we set our properties. And I just wanted to get a little bit out of scope for this example and show you guys how we can better utilize components and variants in prototyping, and not just to create design systems. So how did I achieve this animation? That's a little bit of a different story. We can make another video completely dedicated to using Smart Animate and how we can better utilize it in Figma. But I just wanted to show you like a quick example of how to create components and how to create sub-variants out of these components. So yeah, that's pretty much about it for today. I hope you found this video valuable. And by the way, I will keep the link to this original Figma file attached in the description below. I will set it to view mode because I don't want anyone to just like mess around with the components and just want to make it easier for other people to copy and paste what I created. But even though I will set it to view mode, you can still have the chance to copy and paste these artboards into your Figma files, and you'll have pretty much full access and control to change whatever and check all the properties that I assigned. I hope you found this video helpful and valuable. Thank you very much for tuning in, and see you next time.